What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we've finished the Group of Five in Independence that you can go back and listen to. We have finished the ACC. We have finished the Big 12. So we are 5 episodes into these conference previews, and tonight we got the Big 10 East, one of the big boys, arguably the best or second best conference in all of college football. So this one's a big one. This is one that I've been very excited for.
Yeah, it's this and the SEC West as far as being, the prestigious conferences or divisions rather. It's one of these where it's got that team up top that nobody seems to be able to stop. And then, some, traditional powers that are on the schedule every year. So it makes it fun because you're really having to pick who's the big dog and who's going to challenge them. So I'm excited to jump in.
This is a big one. Let's not waste any time. Let's dive right in. And just as our other episodes that we've done, we're going to go in the order of predicted order of finish. So the order of finish that we think this division is going to have. So we're going to start at the top, and you can't start at the top of the Big 10 East without talking about Ohio State. So we're going to talk about Ohio State. Ohio State coming off of a 7-1 season, a 52-24 loss in the national championship game to Alabama after going undefeated in the regular season. And that's the second regular season in a row where they went undefeated, lost in the college football playoff. Third year for Ryan Day. I mean, expectations for Ohio State are to be right back in there in the college football playoff. So I think the question then becomes, A, can they accomplish that? B, where do they rank among these top 5 teams? Are they legitimate national title contenders?
Yeah, I actually would take something from Chuck Oliver, what he said. He dove in. He was thinking, hey, you lose generational quarterback in Justin Fields, and you lose a couple big players off the defense. There's some players who've left. Let me go do a deep dive. They lost, Trey Sermon in the backfield. Let me go do a quick deep dive and see the vulnerabilities of Ohio State and really dive in. And then after he looked at it, he said, this might be the best Ohio State team that there's been in 30 years. And so, taking that from Chuck Oliver, king of college football, king CFB, I appreciate, what he's meaning by that is that, you can knock them on experience, which you can knock any of the top teams really for experience because, they tend to reload because they tend to put people in the pros, which is exactly what Ohio State did. So I think Ohio State's going to keep chugging along. If people are looking for Ohio State, the Ohio State haters out there. I was raised to be a hater growing up, in the South. That was what we're traditionally wanted, to do. So for Ohio State haters out there, it's going to be difficult because you're going to have to watch them probably go undefeated again this year. But I mean, the team, yes, I mentioned lost Justin Fields, such a talent. Ryan Day had him, his perfect quintessential quarterback in Justin Fields. What's he going to do next? Well, like we've said before with other situations, it doesn't really matter who wins the job. I think we said it with Texas. We feel good about whoever wins the job because they'll have beaten out a formidable opponent. Same here. You've got CJ Stroud looks to be the leader in the clubhouse. None of these guys have thrown a college pass, though. You've got Jack Miller as a redshirt freshman as well. And then you've got Jack Sawyer, 5-star coming in, early enrollee. So, you've got definitely plenty to pick from there. For me, I do think it will be CJ Stroud just because I think that he kind of brings that dual ability that I say Jack Sawyer. It's Kyle McCord.
Jack Miller, you're good.
Jack Miller and Jack Sawyer is their top defensive player. Anyways, I was like, I had it pulled up here. It's Kyle McCord as the other quarterback. So, but any of those three is going to be great. But I really think that, yeah, you win that job. You're surrounded by, pick of the litter. You've got backs on backs behind you. You've got, like you've said several times, Jacob, the deepest receiver room in the nation. Chris Olave coming back is just like icing on the cake because you already had Garrett Wilson and you already had all those freshmen from last year that are just fighting for a spot on the plane, to play. You had Jamison Williams transfer to Alabama, but really that was just a casualty, some attrition. They've got 7 returning starters on offense. Master Teague is listed as a starting running back. You and I both don't believe that. We believe that Travion Henderson will come in and be the lead back. They got Travion Henderson, 5-star running back, coming in, as well as Evan Pryor, who's a 4-star, very highly rated 4-star. So the rich get richer there in that regard. Master Teague, I think, is still very valuable in this offense, showing that he can maybe be that second back coming off. If he has to start, he'll start. But my hunch is that before too long, Travion Henderson will have overtaken him. They'll be off to the races. Defensively, only 4 starters back, but like you and I have said multiple times, like these top teams, they can just reload and just put the best players in. Jack Sawyer, who I previously called the quarterback, he's actually a defensive lineman, but he's a 5-star, following in the lineage of Joey Bosa and the Bosa brothers and Chase Young, for the love of goodness. I can't even come up with these names right now. But yeah, this great defensive line is going to be led by Tyreek Smith and Haskell Garrett. I think both of them as returning starters bring a lot, but you're going to have a lot of infuse of this young talent. So definitely looking forward to seeing these guys kind of come together. But what do you think, Jacob? I mean, are these other teams going to be able to catch them or nip them at all on the schedule?
No. In short, no, they're not. Ohio State, their win total set at 11, whole number win total, cowards. So you mentioned it. Returning production, they ranked 121st out of 127 teams. This kind of thing doesn't matter with only a few teams in the country. And Ohio State has recruited on a level the only 2 other teams have. That's Alabama and Georgia. And Ohio State is that top tier in recruiting that year in and year out are consistently recruiting in the top 3. Alabama has won every recruiting title except for 2 in the last decade. And those 2 years, Georgia won, and Ohio State, it seems to be, has been number 2 every single year. A big question was, can Ryan Day come in and keep on what Urban Meyer had built up there? And so far, they haven't lost a regular season game, and he's out-recruited Urban Meyer. So
that's wild.
The answer is yes. If I'm ranking top head coaches in the country, I think Josh Pate ranked Ryan Day ahead of Dabo Swinney. I don't know if I can definitively say that yet. After this year, I could.
It'd be tough
if they win the championship. I could definitively say that this year. So you mentioned it's not going to matter who plays QB because Ohio State just got better at wide receiver. They got better at running back, and they got better at offensive line.
Yeah.
And that's better from a team that just was the second best team in the country. The defensive line will be even better. Their top 2 guys, Zach Harrison and you mentioned them, Haskell Garrett, are back. And these 2 freshmen that they just brought in, Jack Sawyer's one, and the one that was most recent, you and I were talking about before the show, JTT, number 1 recruit in the country.
Yeah.
Those 2 defensive linemen are like, put that against any top 2 defensive linemen that have committed in any class, those probably rank at the top. And so it's hard not to look at this Ohio State team and be excited. We're picking them to go 12-0. So one thing that was encouraging to me was typically when a team loses the way that Ohio State lost in the national championship, coaches tend to overreact and, want to blame someone on staff and get rid of some coaches. Ohio State kept everybody after that game. They just looked at themselves in the mirror and said, hey, honestly, we were about this close. And Alabama was really good. There's no need to change what we're doing because we're this close. And I think Ohio State believes that. I think C.J. Stroud's going to start at quarterback. I think he'll be in New York as a Heisman finalist. I think Garrett Wilson will be too. So, Ohio State, we said it in our, teams we're buying stock in. I'm buying all the stock in Ohio State. We haven't made our playoff or championship picks yet, but just know that Ohio State will definitely be a part of that conversation when that time comes. And when you and I make those picks, you're going to have to fend off me for wanting to pick Ohio State to win the national championship. I'm very excited about this team. And if you're a college football fan who likes good football, watch Ohio State this season. They're going to put on a clinic against their schedule. I mean, schedule-wise, they get Oregon in week 2. That'll be really fun. It's July 7th we're recording this. On July 7th, I would bet Ohio State up to 2 touchdowns easily. I would lay 14.
What's your gut that the line will be? I mean, it's
13 and a half.
You think that it will open at something close to
that? I
that?
think it'll be close to 2 touchdowns. So okay. I would put it at 13 and a half, and I would lay those easy. Would you lay 13 and a half?
I mean, it's at home. I probably feel comfortable with that. I know that I'm trying to remember a conversation we had with our buddy Hunter. I believe you said something last year when we were talking about that game, and you said that, because it was supposed to be played last year in Eugene.
Right, in Eugene.
And you were like, Ohio State would win by 3 touchdowns. You said that last year. So I'm almost like, oh, so do you think a little bit more of Oregon or a little less of Ohio State to have them just 2 touchdowns now? But that I love your confidence with them. I'd probably lay it if we're talking. I mean, 2 touchdowns. Ohio State's going to be like a 3 touchdown favorite in a lot of their games, probably. So that
17.
Game,
would you lay 17?
Yeah.
I would too.
I guess
I do think they're going to win by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So they're scheduled to, I mean, out of the West, they avoid Iowa, Wisconsin, and Northwestern. So, I mean, even schedule-wise, it's just setting up for Ohio State. You get the early game with Oregon, but you avoid the 3 best teams in the Big Ten West as well. So they should cruise through the schedule. This is a 12-0 team. Win total's at 11. I can pretty confidently this is going to go push to over. This is not a 2-loss team. This is a really good football team. So they're the class of the division. I'm putting them on the Clemson, like in the ACC, where they're just a class above everybody else in their conference. Alabama in the SEC. Ohio State's right there in that conversation. So let's move on to the rest of them. So Penn State, we have second in the division, and this would be a bounce back year. Penn State, we talked about it a little bit. This is a team that I think COVID affected more than a lot of other teams in the country last year with the opt-outs and the freak injuries that happened with Penn State as well, stricter COVID restrictions. So Penn State's a talented team. We expect them to bounce back. But talk me through Penn State. Why are we buying some stock in Penn State to bounce back and be second best team in the Big Ten East?
Well, let's start with last year. It really seemed like anything that could have gone wrong did go wrong as far as Journey Brown, opting out / being, basically unable to continue his football career. And then Noah Cain, who is that very highly rated running back, that was a freshman previously and then was going to be a rising sophomore. They're expecting a lot out of him regardless of what Journey Brown was going to do. And then he tore his ACL. So it was like right out of the gate, you lose not 1, but 2 very competent runners. They had to go with what they had, shortened season. So still a pretty impressive time by Kevon Lee. That early season loss, that first game to Indiana, which, they were down big and then they came roaring back and then Indiana wins, that touchdown to 2-point conversion late, which was off such a fun game. That was one that they just really needed because, they got off to the start they got off to, and they lost their first 5 games and then they won their last 4 games. They ended with a 4-5 record. That's something that it's going to have an asterisk by it when you're going back and looking in the history books. It's not going to be something that's regularly expected. Because they went obviously from playing Indiana, immediate play to Ohio State. Well, they lost both those games. Then all of a sudden they're reeling, and then they just kind of got in their head. They weren't a tough enough team to come out of that. It's going to be tough this year, starting out with Wisconsin, starting out at Wisconsin. That will be tough. But as far as the team itself goes, Noah Cain looks like he's healthy, that running back, which that's going to be huge for them to really kind of solidify. Kevon Lee, who played most of last year as the main guy, he's their leading rusher returning. He'll be back, and they'll both be kind of a tandem running back This is, of course, behind, Sean Clifford, who is a quarterback, and you and I have both said that he kind of holds things back from the quarterback position. I'm not sure if he's going to finish the year as the starter. We do think that he kind of limits them a little bit. Having a returning starter is better than not having a returning starter, so I'll at least give a notch in that direction. 7 returning on offense, though. 4 of their top 5 returning pass catchers. Obviously, they lose Pat Fryermuth, the all-everything tight end who got drafted. Defensively, they returned 7 starters as well, and they tend to just reload, especially defensive line. They've kind of been, well thought of for the past several years for that. And then they've, bringing in, they did kind of a smaller signing class. They only had, 17 that they brought in as high school players. They had several stay back as far as the super seniors, and then they brought in 6 transfers. So you got some guys that are ready to play or at least be in part of the 2 deep. I really feel, strongly that they're going to take a big step forward, which really could be more of a just correctional step, Jacob, rather than them actually taking this big step forward. Last year considered just that anomaly step back year. This is just kind of, regress to the mean, however you say it, them come back to normal.
I mean, you tell me what sounds more like the anomaly. 11-3, 11-2, 9-4, 11-2, 4-5.
Yeah.
That sounds like a freak incident to me. So it's actually hard to believe to me that this is James Franklin's 8th year at Penn State, but
that is crazy.
That, like, before last year, we expected them to be like number 2 in the Big Ten, and it was close with Ohio State.
Yeah.
And the gap seems to be a lot wider given what Ohio State's in the past 2 seasons, and especially after what Penn State did last year, losing their first 5, but they rallied to win 4 in a row. I was reading an article this week where, 0-5 is all over the locker room this offseason. So they get a full offseason. Some big changes coaching-wise. They get their new offensive coordinator, Mike Yurcich. Yurcich. The C is S. Anyway, he was 7 seasons as offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State. He was Ohio State's passing game coordinator in 2019. Last year, he was the offensive coordinator at Texas. So he's been at big schools. One thing with his offense is like very, very fast pace. The offense seems to be fired up about the kind of offense he's going to run. He's already gotten a couple big commits on offense, including a quarterback for the 2022 cycle. It's excited about the offense. They have a great 2 top wide receivers in, Johan Dotson and Keandre Lambert-Smith. There you go. True freshman. They're going to need some freshmen to step up in the wide receiver room. Defense should be much improved. This should be a top 15 unit defensively in the country. And like you said, it's going to look like a much bigger step forward than it actually is. The win total set at 9. We're picking a push. We're picking Penn State to go 9-3. Now, Daniel, I'll ask you, win total set at 9. What is more likely? They go 10-2 or 8-4?
It's tough because I do think that they have a couple of boogers on their schedule. They draw Auburn this year in the out of conference, and no matter what, as far as Auburn goes, whether they're rebuilding or not, that's still a team with the athletic profile that can come in and beat you. Not to mention already playing, they get Iowa and Wisconsin from the West and
on the road.
And on the road. Both of those teams we expect to be, Iowa last year, like their defense, we just expect in Iowa to be nasty, and they're going to ugly up every game as they love to do. So, I mean, I think that it'd probably be more likely they go 8-4 than 10-2. But I feel good about 9-3. I really do. I feel like they're a strong 9-3 candidate for what we expect them to do. But a little sneak preview. How about that matchup with Auburn? The last 2 Vanderbilt coaches, defensive coordinator Derek Mason for Auburn, and then obviously James Franklin, head coach. That might be a little bit of bad blood there.
Let's just say we're not picking Penn State to lose a home game. If Penn State's going to rebound, it will likely be because of a rejuvenated offense under the new offensive coordinator. And it's really going to depend on the quarterback play it gets from Clifford. He needs to take a big step forward. And so I would say 8-4 is more likely simply because of what I've seen from Clifford. But if he takes a step forward, 10-2 is very likely for this team. And if the offense takes a step forward, the defense is going to be very good. If the offense takes a step forward, this is a very, very good football team. Now, third in the division, a lot of people are going to have Indiana here. And maybe we should have too. But we just, we got a little sniff of something that we liked. And for whatever reason, I guess we're going to stick to this now that we're recording. We're picking Michigan to finish third in the division.
I suppose.
And I guess we can still change it. I know, now's our last chance. But Michigan, this win total set at 7.5. And that just seems low for a Michigan team that, it's only been 3 years since they were a game away from the college football playoff. I mean, they got waxed by Ohio State in that last game, but I think Jim Harbaugh gets, I don't know. I was going to say he gets a bad rap. He used to get paid a lot more money than he does. I think Harbaugh's a good coach, but he's not doing what Michigan fans want and expect. And when you're trying to compete with Ohio State, this is a very difficult job because we've seen what Ohio State is, and they're just in another class. This is like an Auburn job where are they going to pull the trigger too quick on a coach like Harbaugh, like Auburn did with Gus, in our opinion? And then, who's going to come in and do a better job? Who right now is guaranteed they can come in and compete with Ohio State? I can name one coach, and his name's Nick Saban, and he's not coming to Michigan.
Yeah, it's tough because, we've talked about some of the biggest names that would be floated around, probably like a Matt Campbell. And while he's done a great job at Iowa State, is he going to simply recruit enough to be in the realm with Ohio State? But let's not talk negatively because we're actually pretty positive on Michigan, considering because we were very high on Indiana last year. We still believe in Indiana. But like you said, we're going Michigan in this third spot. We do think that they do get a little bit of a bad rap. They are better athletically than most people realize, better with the blue chip ratio, better with just overall talent in general. So in theory, they should be able to, quote unquote, roll the helmets out there and beat most of these teams. We know that hasn't been the case, but I do think that this is kind of going to be a prove it year in a way for Harbaugh, just kind of getting up off the mat after just a poor 2-4 year last year. Again, very weird, just like the Penn State deal. But they're bringing in some really high-profile recruits. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy is going to be the one everybody talks about at quarterback. And they haven't really had like a stud quarterback recently. When Shea Patterson was there, he was a former 5-star, but he went to Ole Miss and he transferred in. He had all this, kind of fanfare about him, and then it was just kind of just a guy, run play action, doing these things. So I don't know if they've necessarily had a playmaker there in a while. Maybe since, oh gosh, what was his name? The guy on the cover of
Denard Robinson.
Denard Robinson. I was going to say Shoelace because that was his nickname, Shoelace Robinson. Yeah. So since they've had him, Cade McNamara, he's listed as the starter of this magazine, but this was before Alan Bowman from Texas Tech mentioned that he was going to transfer in. I know that you've got the Phil Steele in front of you. And Alan Bowman, for some reason, is being picked as the starter at quarterback.
You're giving away our secrets, man.
Look, I know
it's
Alan
the
Bowman.
Book the experts can't deal without. And so that's why we have it.
So I guess my point with Alan Bowman, you and I, you're like, yeah, if they're going to make the mistake to start him, then that's their own fault. So I think that he helps in the sense that, hey, he's got experience and he's a high-level backup. But J.J. McCarthy, at some point, he's got to start for this team to really take a next step. They've got 3 returning starters on offense. I'd say that's actually probably a pretty good thing. Defensively, they've got 9 returning starters, which I would say it's a good thing. Defense is going to be stout. Offense, they needed some shakeups. Joe Milton is gone. He went to LSU.
I can't remember.
He went to LSU or Auburn. I don't know. Anyways, he left. He went somewhere else. But there's a shakeup on offense. There's defense will all be back. I really like Donovan Edwards, the running back that they're bringing in this year. He's a 4-star back, very highly rated 4-star, one that was on the verge of a 5-star. And so I think that, along with Hassan Haskins, who was the starter last year, averaged over 6 yards a carry, had 6 touchdowns in just 6 games. So that's a big deal. You add in Donovan Edwards. I think that they can add a dimension to this offense. Donovan Edwards specifically can add a dimension to this offense that they've been missing. And it can add kind of that next gear. So really want to see if they can take another step. I think that they can. We're kind of doing this whole gambler's fallacy thing and thinking, hey, maybe this is the year that Michigan kind of gets a few things more right than wrong and kind of comes back to the Michigan we've grown to know.
Let's do a similar exercise. What sounds like the anomaly? 10-3, 8-5, 10-3, 9-4, 2-4.
Yeah.
That sounds like the anomaly. So Michigan gets a ton of crap. They've had some really good football teams in the last 5 years. They've had some records and results that a lot of teams, like fans, would want. But for Michigan, what you're being compared against is Ohio State. That is Michigan's biggest problem, honestly, is that, that's your litmus test, is Ohio State. Harbaugh gutted his staff this offseason. He hired 6 assistants younger than 40, including 33-year-old Mike McDonald to come in and be defensive coordinator. Longtime defensive coordinator Don Brown is out. You mentioned it. Biggest question for me is who's playing quarterback? If McCarthy's playing quarterback, I would put a lot on the over 7.5 win total because this defense is going to be really good. They've got 2 legit receivers who could be like all Big Ten. Ronnie Bell, obviously that's the name a lot of people know. Cornelius Johnson, who's a sophomore this year. He's a receiver, again, who could be like a number 1 receiver in the Big Ten. They've got 2 legit guys at wide receiver. You mentioned Donovan Edwards at running back. They're deep at tailback. I mean, what's more likely here for Michigan? I mean, I'll throw it out there. 10-2 or 7-5. I would say, like, what's more likely? 8-4 or 6-6, with it being like right there at 7. Like 8-4 is so much more likely for me. The schedule, the schedule sets up nice. They do have to go to Wisconsin. They get Northwestern out of the West. They get Washington, which we'll get to the Pac-12 here in a few weeks. But it's at home. They don't have to go to Washington. It's at home that game is. I just think 7.5 is not giving this team enough credit. I think eventually you're going to go with McCarthy, whether that's, openers against Western Michigan. Maybe you mess around with both quarterbacks and you're like, McCarthy's our guy. Or, the Washington game, good or bad, McCarthy plays really well and you win, or Bowman plays really bad and you lose. You make the change there. I think it happens early. I hope McCarthy plays. We're kind of betting on this, but we're picking Michigan to go 9-3 this season.
Yeah, it's funny because you and I have talked about it before, but really, it's weird betting on a freshman, especially a true freshman quarterback, but we've just seen it too much. Guys being ready to play as soon as they get to college because the high school game has gotten so much better at preparing these quarterbacks, and they're just processing so much more information, and the game has just been made a way for these guys to come right in. Years past, we'd say, hey, he's got to come in and earn his dues. He's going to have to redshirt or he's going to have to battle it out. And a lot of these old school coaches, which Harbaugh is an old school coach, might say, I'm going to go with this guy who's got experience and I'm going to stick with that. That's a very safe thing for coaches to do. But, if you're going to keep up in the arms race of college football, you have got to have a gunslinger. And I think that they've got one with J.J. McCarthy. They're just going to have to go to him and go to him early.
Bud Elliott and Josh Pate talked about this topic with quarterbacks being ready a lot earlier than they used to be. And it's because of national coverage and the fact that these guys are playing 7-on-7 with the best people and against the best people. That high school ball has gotten better. These high school offenses are running the same concepts that these college teams are. And these college offenses, let's be real, and they're smart for doing it, are a lot easier for quarterbacks to play in. You're not coming into a system where you're asking a freshman quarterback to make 5 reads on a play. Most plays are making 1, maybe 2, like reads before they're getting the ball out of their hand. So, yeah, McCarthy's a 5-star, and 5-star quarterbacks nowadays are pretty on the money with how good they're going to be. So,
and he's coming from IMG Academy, which not say what you will as far as what they do to get there, transferring, all that kind of stuff, but like they're a football workshop. They get you trained and ready to go on the field. You're not just with great players, but you're with great coaches. These players, they're being developed for the next level, trained for the next level like no other. That's why they can't compete for state championships, because they're kind of in a different class in the state of Florida. So it's just very interesting. So
after Michigan, we got a team probably a lot of people have 2 or 3 in the division. I don't blame them. Indiana. LEO, love each other. I have a fun fact. Indiana is one of 3 Power 5 teams that has never won 10 games. Can you name the other 2?
Okay, so there's 3 teams that have never won 10 games.
Never gotten the double-digit wins. I'll give you a hint. There's one in the Big 12, one in the SEC.
I was going to say no, because, is it Vanderbilt?
Yeah, there you go. You're going to say, because James Franklin 9-3.
James Franklin had 9-3. He had 3 9.
They lost their bowl game.
Yeah. Okay. And then one in the Big 12. Oh my gosh, is it Kansas? I hope so.
It's not. Remember that was 7th season?
Oh yeah. What's his name? Mangino. Whatever that coach was.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways.
Not Kansas.
Not Kansas. Kansas State.
Iowa State. So you're looking at a season where it is a real possibility where Vanderbilt at the end of this season could be the only Power 5 team to have never won 10 games.
That's crazy.
Fun fact. Anyway, Indiana coming off of an unbelievable season, 6-2. Everyone remembers that opening game against Penn State, the 2-point conversion. Did he go out of bounds? Who cares? What a win.
Who cares?
For the 3rd consecutive year, Michael Penix is coming off of a season-ending injury. In 2018, it was an ACL. In 2019, it was a broken clavicle. In 2020, it was another ACL. So Michael Penix is coming back. Indiana's going to be good again. We know that. What's the ceiling for Indiana?
I mean, the ceiling is 10 wins, I think. But I think that Michael Penix Jr. coming back, that's great. And I do think that he makes their offense more efficient and more dangerous just in general. 14 touchdowns, 4 picks last year before he got hurt. Having Jack Tuttle back as well as the backup quarterback, I think he had a pretty good year, finishing the year out last year as the starter. So just having a guy who's seen live bullets before, both these guys are back. So I think that just the quarterback room, if Michael Penix isn't 100%, I do believe that Jack Tuttle can run the offense and be successful and do what they need him to do. Now, they lose Stevie Scott at running back. He was their lead rusher, but Tim Baldwin Jr., he was the one that was more efficient. He had 6.4 yards per carry. He's a guy that I see taking that next step at running back. And then, we've got Samson James listed as a starter right now. But really out wide, Fry Fogle, he was a little bit of a surprise coming back. We were expecting him to go pro after the year that he had, but him and Walt Fillier had a fantastic year. Fry Fogle really had the better year, though. Averaging, 19.5 yards per catch, 7 touchdowns. He was their deep threat. I felt like he caught 10 touchdowns against Ohio State last year. Every time Michael Penix just rolled out and just chucked it deep, Fry Fogle seemed to be catching it. So I do think that he is more important to the offense than whichever quarterback is playing, because I think either quarterback can get it to him. So I think that's a big deal. Defensively, returning 9 starters, that's huge for a team like this that's going to build year over year. Like we've said before, the teams with a higher athletic profile, they can reload. Indiana's not one of those. They're definitely one of these teams that needs to develop over time. We love Tom Allen as a coach. Definitely think that, they will take another step maybe as a program, but, maybe fall back into their place behind Penn State and Michigan.
Indiana, I almost see them as an Iowa State. It's funny they're in the teams who have never won 10 games, but where
Interesting comparison.
right where's the ceiling with Indiana? Because I think there is one. Their culture's great. 5-star culture only gets you so far. So we're picking Indiana to go 8-4. I'll start with that. So another great season for Indiana, but you got to start recruiting well if you want to compete with the big dogs. And the teams that are recruiting well are Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, who are all on your schedule. Wisconsin just came off their best recruiting class ever. So other teams in the Big Ten are starting to recruit. They open up at Iowa. That's a big opening game on the road. That's a fun week one.
So fun.
They've Indiana's defense does look capable of hanging with anybody in the Big Ten other than maybe Ohio State. And this will probably be the most complete Indiana team ever. And so, as you said, I think the ceiling is 10-2, but I think the floor is like 7-5. And so this is not an Indiana team that's going to go 4-8. But We're picking them to get 4. They've got tough games. I mean, at Iowa, as an opening game is tough. They get Cincinnati in their out of conference, games. So that's going to be one of the best group of 5 teams in the country. You go to Penn State and to Michigan. Those are 2 tough games. So 8-4 for Indiana. I hope Penix comes back and has a great season, stays healthy, goes to the NFL. They're going to have the second best, I think, receiver room in the Big Ten, in another great year for Indiana. Before we get to the second half of the Big Ten, Daniel, let the people know where they can find more info about us.
Well, the best thing to do, obviously, if you want to follow the show, is go to Instagram and Facebook. Follow us at the Extra Point Pod. That's where you're going to see all of our graphics, anything that we put out there, information about the show. We send links out there. Obviously, you can go there, follow the link tree. You can see our pretty faces on YouTube when you follow that link. Subscribe on YouTube. That way it pops up when you open it. It just makes everything a lot easier. And then, get us on whatever platform you like listening to the best. If you're listening to us on Apple, you didn't realize we're on Spotify, we're there. Go there. If you're on Spotify and you'd rather be on Apple, do it, And then there's all these other places like Stitcher and Google and wherever else. We're on all of them. So leave us a 5-star review. Those help us out a ton. On Apple. It helps us get recommended. Kind of let us know a preview. Let us know something you want us to mention on the team. Maybe a shout out, something like that. Comment on YouTube, whatever it takes.
Thank you, Daniel. Let's get to the bottom half of the Big Ten. But I do want to preface, the bottom half of the Big Ten has changed, or Big Ten East, excuse me. I think the floor of the Big Ten East has seriously been raised, and that these bottom teams have all gotten a lot better. So we're going to talk positive here on this podcast. 5th in the division, we're picking Michigan State. This is year 2 for Mel Tucker at Michigan State. If you remember, he came in, June of no, it was like March, April, though, when he came into Michigan State. So a true year 0. And Michigan State average returning production, 64th in the country. So literally right in the middle. Win total set at 4.5. Given where we have them right now, I'm guessing we're probably going over here on Michigan State.
I believe so. So these guys, it was definitely year 0 is, like you said, like year -1 with how things unfolded last year for Mel Tucker. It's tough for a coach to get, it's tough in year 1 for any coach to get buy-in. Imagine a guy that came in so late as he did. I think he's a good coach. He's still, in only his 3rd year of being a head coach at all. So that's something we have to keep in mind with Mel Tucker, is that, while we give him so much credit defensively, he's such a great defensive mind. He's been with the greatest defensive minds in the game, and he's a blue blood type recruiter. You know, it's still Michigan State. They've actually been to the playoff before. You know, this is a team that a program that hasn't fallen. You know, it's fallen from, you know, being in the status that it was, but it's not just gone and forgotten. So I think that if he gets a couple of good recruiting classes under him, it's gonna, you know, it's what came first, the chicken or the egg. Is he going to be able to recruit before they win, or are they going to have to win a little bit and then recruit? So it's different at different programs. I have a feeling they're going to have to win a few games this year, maybe even go to a bowl game to really get this machine rolling the way that Mel Tucker needs it to go. So as far as the team goes, I mean, 7 returning on defense, 7 starters, that is. Definitely expect them to. I mean, they've got their top 2 sack guys, both with 3 sacks. You know, it was a shortened year last year, only 7 games. So they've got Drew Besley back, and then Michael Fletcher. Both of them had 3 sacks apiece. And then, you know, tackles wise, they have Noah Harvey back. You know, he's playing middle linebacker. He's their second leading tackler returning. So I definitely expect some of these guys to really take a step forward defensively. As far as the offense goes, they've got 7 returning starters, but they also have brought in 14 transfers. So a lot of these guys are going to play right away and just kind of help, you know, the athletic profile. They've got guys they've needed to take a step, and to take that step, if you're not recruiting high school players, you've got to go to the transfer portal. They've got 14 coming in. These are guys that have already played. Most of them are ranging in 3 to 4 star range. No, they don't have any spectacular guys coming in, but these are guys that are going to come in, be on the 2 deep, and you know you can count on them on Saturday. One of them is going to probably be their starting quarterback, and that's Anthony Rousseau, coming from Temple. 6'4", 235 pounds. He's a 3-star in high school. He's transferring as a 3-star as well. You know, I expect him to come in and take that job. He's got 4 out of 5 returning offensive linemen. So I think that that's going to be big for him. And then, you know, Jalen Reed, who is the number 1 receiver last year, as well as Jalen Naylor, both of those guys I think are going to be big for Rousseau to, you know, take a next step and maybe, like you said, maybe raise the floor of this Michigan State team.
I have a quote here from Mel Tucker. It says, quote, "The second year you should see improvement. You usually see quite a bit of improvement because the players understand what's expected. The players know the coach a lot better. The coach know the players. And so there's better connection, better understanding, and you know a lot more of what your returning players can do. I've been in situations where you've had a tremendous success in year 2. We'll see how it goes. But right now, our focus is just on getting better, gaining ground, and just being relentless in everything we do." Now, I know the most recent year 2 he had, and that was taking an 8-5 team and going to the national championship. So
Right.
that was with Georgia in year 2. So, hey, he's buying into the year 2 hype. The personnel department has been revamped, or they've revamped the roster rather. And with a lot of transfers, you mentioned biggest one being at quarterback, to be able to win this year and in seasons to come. So we are picking the over for Michigan State, 5-7 for Michigan State. They do have to go to Miami out of conference. We're picking that as a loss, but 3-6 in the Big Ten with a tiebreaker in there puts them 5th in the division. Let's go to the next team, Maryland. Maryland's a team you and I kind of on our own were like, hey, I'm kind of buying some Maryland hype, you know, behind closed doors. And we go through the schedule, win total set at 6. So we are buying some Maryland hype. Just how much hype are we buying, Daniel?
Yeah, it's one of these things where we both like what we see. We're not sure, you know, if they're going to necessarily kick the door in, because they've had games where, oh, hey, they're kind of back, and then they've had games where they lose, you know, 43-3 to Northwestern. You know, they beat Penn State last year, which I don't know if it's notable because Penn State lost 5 games last year. You know, they beat Minnesota last year, kind of took a step back. So It's tough to determine what they did. It was only 5 games last year that they played. They went 2-3. This schedule honestly is a really fun schedule for them. I like that they play West Virginia. I think that's a much bigger game in that part of the country than we're letting on, or than it'll probably be talked about nationally. I think that game means a lot in that area. So West Virginia is coming to Maryland. Obviously, the one you're going to talk most about is the one with the famous last name, that is Talia Tagovailoa. He had a pretty good year last year, over 1,000 yards, but he turned the ball over just as much as he had 7 picks to his 7 touchdowns. He has got to take a step forward. Obviously, Mike Locksley, this is going to be his 3rd year as the head coach. So I do expect him to, continue building the program moving forward, but we've got to see some real positive steps offensively. I think specifically since he's an offensive coach, they've got 8 returning starters on offense and 6 on defense. I think this is kind of the perfect storm for them to really, solidify themselves. And like we've said with Michigan State, really raise the floor of their program. Don't lose games that you're not supposed to. Really put pressure on the teams that are supposed to beat you by, lighten up the scoreboard, score a bunch. Raheem Jarrett, former 5-star at wide receiver. I mean, they've got tons of just dudes out there. Dante Demas. I mean, all these guys had a high, average yards per catch. Jashawn Jones as well. So a lot of these guys, if they get going in the right direction, I would expect them to put up a bunch of points. So whether they're, I don't think they're going to just score 3 points in a game, but who knows? Northwestern, they got a tough defense. So I do think that going forward, that's the biggest thing for them is consistency, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. If they're continuing to score, even if they lose games because of their defense, I think that would settle a lot more of the Maryland fans to have consistency, at least on that side of the ball.
And Locksley brings in an old buddy as his OC with Dan Enos.
Oh, yeah.
So Dan Enos was with him at Alabama coaching quarterbacks while Locksley was offensive coordinator. And he's coming in to do the offense. So Maryland does rank 10th in returning production in the country. So they're returning a lot. Win total set at 6. We're going for a push here, 6-6 for Maryland. I think they could easily go over this win total. And when you have quarterback figured out, a lot can go right. I want to talk for a minute about some off the field stuff with Maryland in a good way. That's recruiting. They've had really good back-to-back recruiting classes. And with their location, where they are in the DMV, if they can own that area, like they're set up to recruit really well. And then 2, similar to Oregon with, the founder of Under Armour being a Maryland grad, they're set up to be, they can do some NIL stuff with Under Armour. So they're set up well to recruit really well. And if they start to get some on the field results, Maryland can start to consistently, sniff that top half of the Big Ten East. It's a tough division. And the only way to compete in a division with Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan is to recruit. You have to recruit. And so if they get to a bowl game this year, if they start to get that 7-5 this year, you're going to start to see some more results in recruiting, which will result in more wins on the field.
Well, they're always going to get free press from, one of their most famous alumni and Scott Van Pelt. He's the, Midnight Sports Center every night. So
that's right.
That's, his big calling card as well as being a Maryland Terp. So, they're one of those teams that can definitely be marketed, and they're like you said, in a great place for the recruiting and the NIL to take off. So, interested to see what goes from here.
I will say last, and I will say not least, even though we're picking them to be last in the division, Rutgers. I kind of feel about Rutgers the way I did about Wake Forest whenever we picked them. It's just hard because I think Michigan State, Maryland, and Rutgers are on the same tier. And so it's hard to decipher who's better than who. And I think Rutgers can be pretty good. The downside with Rutgers is you're 82 in returning production. And so you're not returning a ton. They do get some transfers, but year 2 for Greg Schiano, win total set at 4. Am I crazy for wanting to believe in Rutgers a little bit?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm looking at up and down their schedule last year, and I see a bunch of fight in this team. Obviously, they started out by beating Michigan State at Michigan State last year. And I mean, losing respectably to Indiana. I mean, they scored 27 on Ohio State. I mean, that's not nothing, you know. I think that you look up and down this schedule and you see just the DNA of the coach. And, you know, with Greg Schiano, for as much as grief he got from all the Tennessee people and them not wanting him and all that kind of stuff, and he didn't have a great run at Tampa Bay. But before all that, he made Rutgers relevant, you know, and he had them in bowl games year in, year out. And he had them at the ceiling of what Rutgers can be. And I do think that he knows the lay of the land and he knows how to get them back there. I believe in them. I think that it's tough. It is tough in this climate to catch up to anybody without being able to recruit like them. And Rutgers simply isn't going to ever do that. So they've got to have years like this where they've got 11 returning offensive starters and 8 returning on defense. So they've got guys coming back that they can take steps forward with, build over time, and then, you know, every 3 or 4 years really have a solid season where they, you know, win 8-9 games maybe. Maybe that's something that they can do. That's more their ceiling. Right now, it's still just too early. There's too many teams in this division for them to really, you know, lift off and take a step up. Everybody can't be on all the time. And unfortunately, they're just the least talented team. And we kind of went with these other teams ahead of them.
Here's why I want to believe in them. Before last year, they lost 21 straight games in the Big Ten. 21 straight games. They won 3 last year. So, we're picking them to go 1-8 in conference, and I'm like, it's just bugging me. So, yeah. We're picking 4-8 for Rutgers. I very much think, you know, that would push the win total. I think 5-7 to 6-6 is very possible for this team. This is a Rutgers team where if I'm a Rutgers fan, I'm starting to get excited about because Schiano's your guy. He's been successful there before. I think he can be successful there again. Like lockdown New Jersey, there is no other team really in that area. In New Jersey, a state that is not the best for talent, but you can get some decent talent out of New Jersey. Like you said, this is not a team that's ever going to compete with the top of the division. And, you know, I wrote my notes here. They'll be at the bottom of the division, but the bottom is not as far away from the top as it once was. And so it's a Rutgers team that I want to believe in. I'll be excited to watch some of their games rather than them being the team that it's like, oh, crap, Rutgers is on next.
Well, think about it like this, Jacob. We compare the Big Ten East to the SEC West a lot, just as far as profile of the division. You've got, you know, your top teams is Alabama and Ohio State. And then you've got your next group of like Texas A&M, LSU, Auburn, whatever. And same over here. But, you know, we expect Arkansas and Ole Miss to be much better just in general for themselves, be better. But they've still got to be towards the bottom of the division just because that's what – I mean, who are you going to put them over? Same with Rutgers here. They're just looking up at a bunch of giants.
Let's play a fun little game. Where would you pick Rutgers to finish? In the ACC Atlantic.
I mean, they'd probably beat out Clemson if it. You know, that's a good question. The Atlantic.
I don't know about the Atlantic. 4th in the Atlantic. How's that?
4th?
Maybe. Where'd you put him in the Coastal? That's the most fun division in football. ACC Coastal. Where do you put Rutgers?
Right ahead of Virginia.
I think Virginia is a really good comparison. That's how good I think this team is Virginia. And we picked Virginia to go 7-5. So that tells you the difference in the ACC and the Big Ten right there. So there's my comparison. I think Rutgers is as good as Virginia. There you go. But we're picking them to go 4-8. Sorry, you're in the Big Ten West or East. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Anyway, but hey, you can follow Daniel on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.